Welcome to Distribution Talk with Jason Bader, the show where we dive into the stories, struggles, and solutions from business owners and thought leaders in the wholesale distribution market. Hey friends, Jason here. First off, I hope everyone is doing their best to stay safe and sane during these extraordinary times. Rather than doing the normal interview, my business partner Marshall Jones and I decided to share some of our thoughts on where this new reality might take the distributor of the future. Like all of you, we're self-quarantining and trying to get used to the physical distancing and the new reality of online communication. While these mediums are not foreign territory for us, we definitely feel the pressure of adapting to this all-or-nothing mode of service. Make no mistake, this crisis will have a lasting impact on us in the distribution community. This is not the time to bury our heads in the sand, as we are a resilient lot. As leaders, we have to be willing to find the positives and help others to adapt. It is time to put service into action. I hope you enjoy our conversation. All right, folks. This episode, we're going to do something a little different on Distribution Talk. Decided that, my business partner, Marshall, and I would talk a little bit about our current reality and maybe some of the changes and what does that mean for distribution and our different working environments. Is that going to make a huge impact on distribution? So without further ado, let me welcome Marshall to the show. Hey there.
Hi, Jason. Happy to be here.
Fantastic, man. Now, it's good to get an opportunity for you and I to banter this stuff back and forth. We may talk about it offline, but I think it would be something of interest to readers, what we're both hearing out in the market space. And then really given, both of our experience level, that I think we got a couple opinions to throw around here. So
we're never short on opinions.
Very true, my friend. Very, very true. Well, just kind of diving in, so Marshall, with this kind of new working environment, we're not necessarily up in front of audiences anymore. And our audience is now virtual, whether it's audio-based or video-based. We're both experimenting in that world a little bit, and testing those waters. So what kind of an impact do you think this is going to have on distribution going forward? I mean, this is a new world for us.
I think it's very early to determine whether or not it's going to have a long-standing effect on how we communicate in distribution, but it's certainly appropriate to start asking ourselves the questions about how things might be different, to be able to leverage what we're learning through this. And, you take the best pieces of what we have developed to combat this situation that we find ourselves in, and at the same time, not rely on some of the things that we thought would work in this type of a situation that we found just don't. I think it's a little early to tell how it's all going to shake out, but it's definitely not too early to start asking those questions.
As I said, it's interesting. I look at this and I look at the way that people are virtually meeting, making references to Hollywood squares here. You've got a lot of people on these, and you see on Instagram or these different social media platforms where people are taking pictures of their virtual meetings. That seems to be in vogue right now. But I think what's fascinating is people are rapidly changing to this environment. I mean, and this is really, for me at least, it's encouraging. I look at this, I'm like, all right, let's adapt. Let's see how fast we can go.
Yeah, I think there's definitely a higher comfort level with this type of interaction today than there has been in the past when we've hit these inflection points. Not long after the financial crisis, as conferences were being canceled and manufacturers were limiting travel because of costs and the recession was coming on, a depression in many of the segments of industrial distribution was encountered. In travel budgets were slashed. They looked to video conferencing and more teleconferencing solutions, to replace the face-to-face interaction that we had for years in this industry. And it really didn't stick. I mean, we've done more of it. There are more conference calls today than there were 10 years ago or 15 years ago. But, the face-to-face component, the outside salesperson visiting their customer's facility or their work site, that really hasn't changed dramatically in those last 10, 15 years since the Great Depression. So there again, it'll be a good question. Is this the tipping point? Has technology finally got us where we can get as much out of, looking at each other over computer monitors as we can, face to face in a room, sensing the reaction of our customer, or, really kind of digging deep into questions or problems? I think it's too early to tell.
Yeah.
The extinction of the outside salesperson has been predicted many, many times in the last
Right.
50, 60 years. And they're a resilient creature. They keep coming back. So it's a question that I don't think we have an answer for yet, but we certainly are seeing them adapt to this new environment. They're trying their best to leverage their relationships that they built physically over the last however many years they've worked with their customers in this short-term span of not being able to actually come out and see them.
Yeah, it's definitely a very rapidly changing environment. And what I guess I'm encouraged to see is that people are finding a way. They're finding a way to reach their customers. And I had this call with a client, I think it was yesterday. We were talking a little bit about how they have had to adapt, obviously the office environment, and primarily he's an inside sales, outward bound type of environment. So, transitioning to being phone call microphone. I mean, that's less a difficult transition, but a couple of his inside salespeople or his sales force said that they had become more productive by going home and doing this rather than being in the office. And so that's one of those that's really struck me. It's like, well, really more
Yeah.
productive. I mean, I know that's not the case for me, but what is going on for these people? And that's
Yeah.
an interesting one. I don't know.
It would be curious to really dig down. I know it's just anecdotal and it's a small sample at this point, but the constraints to productivity that I experience at home are usually when I run into other family members at the home.
Right. Sure.
That seems to be
Sure.
a challenge to productivity. And obviously, this is a similar situation to summertime where the kids are all home. And are these millennials that don't have children yet that are being more productive at home? Are these baby boomers that kids have moved away and aren't back with them that are being more productive? I think it would be very hard to imagine a situation where if you had a house full of people being able to be as productive as you are in your spot back at the office. But we all know that, if we were to measure the time that we spend interacting with our coworkers at our office, I mean, that's just the whole push to kind of shared space or work at home kind of spots and moving people out of their offices. And there again, that trend, I think it's too early to tell whether or not that trend's going to be the right trend or not for
Right.
some of these positions. But it'll be curious to see if his experience continues to prove out that his folks are being more productive at home than they were in the office.
Yeah, I think you've got a very good point. Who are those people? What are those distractions in the home or lack thereof? That they can get in. And the people that I've spoken to that tend to be more productive at home don't have those distractions around them. But I think the thing that really struck me when I was having this conversation with him was, what are those things in the office that are really distracting? And as we come out of this, how do we identify and how do we eliminate those distractions, or at least minimize as much as possible? Because it's really pointing to that there is something wrong, in the office. I hate to say it,
Sure.
that there is a tremendous time suck that's going on that is it's forcing us to work longer hours because those hours are less productive.
I agree with you. I think there's a lot of challenges to being as effective as we can when we're, shoulder to shoulder with folks in facilities. And I've seen more and more larger companies over the last 15 or 20 years go to big tables of employees. They don't even really have cubicles anymore. It's just big open rooms full of their employees. And, what we found the employees now doing are walling themselves off with headphones.
Right.
Because they can't seem to focus or concentrate on trying to get the work done that they're assigned without the distraction of those that are working around them. So, on a sales counter, you fight that same battle. In an inside sales bullpen, you fight that same battle of the
Sure.
distractions that are inevitable. But I think that while the list of advantages or the pros of working from home are long, especially in congested areas where travel and commute time is very high. The cost of commuting is significant. So if an employee can work from home, doesn't have all that cost, then obviously they feel like they're bringing more home, more take home pay by not having to spend that money to get to work. They've got other productivity drains that are involved with the office chit chat and the sports pools and all those kind of things when we actually have sports going on.
Right,
But,
right.
at the same time, what I'm struck with and what I'm really wondering what this will do is that there is a tremendous amount of loyalty amongst the employees that work for industrial distributors. When you go in and meet with our clients, it's not uncommon to hear of people that have been there 15, 20, 25, 35 years.
Right.
And a big part of that is, and you ask them, well, why do you stay? And the response is often, well, I feel like it's a family here.
Mhm.
Whether it's a
Mhm.
family business or not, the feeling amongst the coworkers is that of a family. And that's what the management team tries to instill. And that's what the long tenured employees find is a big part of why they stick around. And, when you move to more of a gig economy feel where you're an independent contractor working from your house, just you're logging in and you're taking customer calls and dumping them off to people you don't know in some other community, do we lose that family feel?
You're absolutely right. I mean, I think that that's that is a loss. I do find though, and it was fascinating. I would agree that maybe when you and I were, active in our businesses, that yes, there was a lot of that. But in this recent couple of weeks, I'm watching people interact online using this, the Hollywood Squares or the Zoom environment or whatever we want to call it. But they're interacting in a different way, and they're becoming this virtual family. Now, does that replace physical contact? I don't know. And physical proximity, I don't know. But I am seeing that people are developing this family environment, and they happen to be sitting at their own homes. Is there stickiness to this? I don't know.
Yeah, I don't
I don't
either.
know.
I don't know how much that is remnants of the relationship that they have from years of, sitting just around the corner
Right.
from each other in the office, or how much of that is, a willingness to build a relationship over a computer screen. I mean,
Yeah.
obviously, online dating and,
Sure.
social media shows us that people can connect and bond with people that, they only know through their mobile devices. So,
Right.
I'm not shocked about what you're finding there, but
Mhm.
it'll be a big question of how deeply do you hold that virtual relationship
Yeah.
when you're approached by a competitor. Come to my screen. My screen will. We have these goodies if you come to my screen, but if you stick with your screen, you're going to lose all these goodies. I just wonder if people will be as committed to their organizations if they feel like they're a virtual employee as opposed to a real employee, one where the owners can connect with their folks in a more real type of way.
It's a very fair point, Marshall. I mean, I think, yeah, if you do move to this virtual environment, for, let's say that we take a few roles that we move to that virtual environment. And
Mhm.
I think the most obvious, one would be that inside sales, telesales environment, administrative functions, those as well. You could probably deploy into this type of reality, but do they really feel part of the team anymore? Is there a loyalty? And I think you've kind of hit it on the head that will it breed a sense of, a temporary sense of
Mm.
being part of this that, well, I can do this for anybody or I can do this anywhere, and I'm no longer bound, honestly, by my geography. The
Correct.
geography is
Yeah.
gone. It's
Yeah.
over. So, can I go work for a distributor? I'm being in the West Coast here, Oregon. Could I go work for a distributor in Charlotte? I'm a virtual employee. It doesn't matter.
Absolutely. In fact, you bring some advantages to the table when you put yourself out there nationally or internationally that way. You might be able to start your work before your customers tend to get up, if you're in a different time zone, or be able
Sure.
to work late into the evening without having to, kind of sacrifice family time or something like that. So, yeah, I
Right.
think there's a lot of pros to the opportunities that come from,
Mhm.
transitioning some of these roles to virtual. It's just, yeah, I think it's a little too early to know if that's the direction that's going to stick, or if once this is over, everybody's going to flood back to, being close proximity with each other.
Yeah, I mean, I think looking at some of these roles, that traditional outside sales is, as we talked about it, eventually being extinct and hasn't quite done it yet. But if you look at the function of that outside sales person, I think calling on job sites, it would be extremely difficult to change that to a virtual environment. Not
Mhm.
impossible, but difficult. But what about somebody calling on an office, a purchasing agent or somebody like that? Is the face to face standing in the office, is that necessary? I mean, I guess I'm trying to figure out what the value proposition is there, of
Yeah.
standing there.
Yeah. Well, I think that there is definitely value that is perceived by the customer, because
Mhm.
if not, telesales, outbound telesales would have taken this business from the field sales force a long time ago.
Yeah.
Telephones have been around for
Yeah.
a long time. So people have been using them in outbound roles and kind of dialing into purchasing agents. But there's so much trust that is required to have an effective buyer seller relationship. And
Mhm.
it's still an open question mark. Can you develop that kind of trust virtually as
Mhm.
opposed to physically? And it's going to be a big question whether or not employees will remain connected to their company. Will customers remain connected to their suppliers if they move to a virtual relationship instead of a physical relationship?
Yeah. I want to go back on one of the comments that you had made about, the amount of time that it takes to commute. Just thinking about this, and I was, texting with my brother-in-law who, he commutes probably an hour and a half in the morning, to his office in San Jose or north of San Jose, actually. And sometimes it can take him 2 hours to get home at night, on
Wow.
this. I know this is just like, and I was just checking in to see how he was doing. And, I made the offhanded comment that now he has 3 more hours to wash his hands and look out the window. And, he just said, hey, man, it's shocking how much more he feels like he's getting done, by not making that commute,
Oh, absolutely.
so I think there is a tremendous amount of productivity time. I think from the individual, they're thinking, "Gosh, I'm capturing this time," and I just started to think about all the people I've known over the years, that had those longer commutes, and what more they could get done by really not having to do that any longer.
Well, I mean, I think there's no reason for a commute longer than 30 minutes, because that's the length of a Distribution Talks podcast episode. So
I agree. So
if you
there's no
can't, why would anybody want to commute any longer than that?
why why.
But I agree with you. There's so much time lost and energy lost. And, on those long commutes and in the big cities, the congestion is getting even worse than it was just a few years back. And you get to someplace after a 45-minute drive in, and you just really aren't ready to connect with people at all. I mean, you have to go
Right,
decompress from the drive, even
right.
though that was supposed to be the relaxing time in. And I see people that are right now kind of grappling with, how do I become productive in this newfound time? And
Mhm.
I haven't seen it translate to new endeavors at this
Mhm,
point, but
mhm.
I've seen people going that this is the new reality. If I don't have a 45-minute an hour commute on a daily basis, I'm going to get a new hobby in, or I'm going to get a new schedule with the family where we can connect more. I think that people would love to find a way to own that time in the future, but it's a little early to tell if they're going to keep it or not. It may be back to business as usual.
We may fall back in, but something is telling me that this environment that we're facing right now and the way that we are trying to connect right now and communicate right now is going to have an impact. It's going to ding the tradition. There's going to
Yeah.
be a dent in the tradition that I don't know if people will be satisfied going back to the business as usual. If they feel like that this has been a positive experience for them from a working environment,
Mhm.
are they now going to push and put pressure on the traditional distribution environment and the traditional office and the traditional way that we've done business forever? Is there going to be a tremendous amount more pressure to adapt to that and to really take into account people's lifestyle choice, people's lifestyle
Yeah.
now? I mean, I think there's going to be a tremendous amount of pressure for the owners of these businesses to listen to that and to hear that.
I absolutely agree that leadership really needs to spend a lot of time as people start to come back, listening to what went well during the quarantine, during the stay at
Yeah.
home time, and what they struggled with.
Yeah.
And, it's probably not too early to start asking those questions. I think, if anything, management and leadership is, you're probably at this exact moment very fixated on cutting costs and operating expenses and relationships
Yeah.
with banks and lines of credit, and making sure your customers are still out there and sound and your receivables are coming in. But at the same time, you really need to make sure that your line managers are talking with their staff regularly. That pandemic is creating a tremendous amount of isolation by design. I mean, our
Hmm.
government is asking us to isolate ourselves, but we as a species are not comfortable with that situation. So we
Right.
need to connect. We need to feel like we're connecting with others. And as a manager, I think part of your responsibility is to make sure that your staff is connecting with you, that you're checking in on them, that you're
Right.
sharing more than you probably need to share at this moment, just to make sure that they know that there's a connection between their company and their supervisor and themselves. So I would encourage every manager to ask those questions that you're posing about what's working and what's not.
It's interesting, Marshall. I just kind of, that sparked a thought as we are sitting here in these isolated points, and I think you're absolutely correct that managers do need to check in and they need to be much more. But I also feel like this affords them this opportunity when we do have these electronic means of communication. I almost feel like it's much more intimate at this point, even though we're not, because there's distractions.
Yeah.
When we try to do that in the office, there's distractions and there's other things that get in the way. But boy, with speaking one-on-one through one of these, different types of mediums, whether it's, a Zoom, GoToMeeting, yada, yada, all the different ones that people are employing at this point, it's really clean one-on-one time. I mean, it's really hyper focused. In the case that you and I happen to be looking screen to screen right now,
Yeah.
that is really intense, focused time. And I think that managers really need to take advantage of that opportunity to
Yeah.
connect and without the distractions.
Absolutely. And their employees need them to do that.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's a true need out there to be visited by some sort of normalcy.
Hmm.
That relationship that you have with your manager, your leader.
Yeah, it just is kind of dawning on me that's an opportunity. It is an opportunity right now to check in and talk and find out what's on their mind because we want to come out of this stronger. We
Yeah,
absolutely do, and
yeah,
we want to, if we can, come out of this more connected, sharing of similar values, sharing of similar thoughts and direction. Yeah, I think that we do have a tremendous opportunity to change the paradigm, going forward here. And your guess is as good as mine as to how long this is going to take and what's
right.
going to happen here. I mean, I just sat on a quick phone call with a client talking about the state of Washington closed all job sites. They basically
Mm.
said that construction is a non-essential business in the state of Washington.
Wow.
I'm not going to debate whether that was the most prudent move or what happened, but it throws you into very decisive mode. You have to make some very tough decisions at that point. And because you're going to have to make those tough decisions, which, sorry, that's what leaders have to do. That's what they have to grow up and do. Being connected and being in communication with people, that is going to alleviate some of the fear and alleviate some of the speculation and misunderstanding and misgiving.
Sure.
It's like, nope, this is the plan and this is the way we're going to go. And people are going to be grasping for that leadership. I think to your point about isolation, that you start reaching out for where is those words of wisdom going to come from? Because maybe you're out of them at that point. You're sitting
Yeah.
trust
Yeah.
me, homeschooling, I am out of ideas, my friend. I am completely out of ideas. So I
Yeah.
am looking for any direction here. But, one of the big things is with this lack of physical contact in the way that we deliver products, in distribution right now, the restrictions on those types of things. Do you see that having a lasting impact?
I think it's one more example of how creative distributors can be, as they find solutions for their customers. And there is definitely along these lines, as far as supply chain, as far as handling material, as far as delivering, capturing, proof of delivery, all of those kind of things. Distributors are going to learn the best practices that are coming from this part of it. And they were definitely going to put those into place moving forward. They have a long track record of finding improvement opportunities whenever pushed. And this crisis is pushing folks to learn how to be better at what they do. And I'm very confident that we're going to see some changes there.
Yeah, just simply the will call process, that's a big change right now. I mean,
Mhm.
that's a tremendous change. And I guess my question is, what is the stickiness of that one? I mean, are we going to realize that we don't need people to come in and hang out at the counter and hang out in the
Right.
showroom?
Right.
And what is a showroom going to look like in the future? Is it necessary any longer? And I don't know, again, these are questions that keep coming through my mind as we adapt and we change, what's going to happen when the restrictions are lifted? Are we going to go right back to where we were before? Well, I don't think anybody really loved where we were before. We always questioned it. It wasn't optimal. And what pieces of what we're doing today can be brought in?
I think there's going to be it's a spectrum. There'll be some folks that rush right back to the way it was, and then others will evaluate what was working out of this and see the benefits of not having customers delayed through an antiquated will call process. I think
Right.
people are actually getting served more quickly than they have historically done. Now, some of that is pre-planning on the customer's part. That'll be a big question mark. Do people kind of go back to the path of least resistance? And if there's a way to come in and place an order at a counter as opposed to calling it in ahead or having it placed online ahead and prepared and packed and ready for, a very quick and easy handoff, what percentage of the customer base will continue to do the pre-work,
Right.
associated with today's environment. But I think distributors are going to want to take advantage of it because it streamlines the delivery process and it makes the time to satisfy a customer's needs less, and that's what we strive for as we try to become more efficient.
Going back to kind of that topic about distractions or wasted time in an office, what is the wasted time in that transaction with a customer? And will the customer going forward, will they allow that anymore?
Sure.
Will they say that's not okay? I can't waste this kind of time. I'm not going to leave my job site to come in and talk with you about a potential solution. My expectation is that question is going to be answered for me right now. And I'm not going to leave my environment, and you're not going to waste my time, by forcing me to come into your antiquated showroom and your will call office and things like that. I feel like that you're going to get a different level of demand coming out of this.
Yeah, I think a lot of folks' expectations will be raised through this process. And fortunately, distributors are good at meeting those expectations. We've got a good track record of finding creative solutions to help those customers with their new expectations.
Yeah, and I think you're absolutely right. And I've said this a number of times this week, people, asking me questions on this. I'm like, look, distribution is a resilient lot. We're good at finding solutions at this thing. And, if we dig our heels in and say, no, this is the way we do that, we're out of business. And I think we all recognize that, but we also have to embrace it very heavily right now, that we are not going to get to do things the same way we did before. But that's okay. That is the innovation spirit. And that's the way that distributors can really push forward and frankly, differentiate themselves from those who are wanting to dig their heels in the sand and go back to the traditional ways. So.
And show their value.
Well, all right, my friend. Well, hey, I hope this was a good little time for us. And I hope the listeners, got something out of it. There's so many more questions about this. And I thought about our practice, and what we do when we speak with distributors is these are the types of questions that we've got to walk through with people.
Exactly.
And I hope that people will reach out to us because, that's what we do is we get to take our experience over the years and just share not only that experience and help people think through things, but also taking, from others, what we're seeing in the world from many and trying to kind of bring some at least thought-provoking questions and calm,
yes,
and calm and help alleviate some panic. So, I mean, I hate to throw that out, but I'm just saying, hey, we can help you guys. So
absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Thanks, Marshall.
You're very welcome.
Speak with you soon, my friend.
Sounds great. Thank you.
Thank you for listening. If you liked what you heard, consider hitting that subscribe button. Links to sponsors, products, and services mentioned during this episode can be found in the show description area on your podcast application or at www.distributiontalk.com. Distribution Talk is edited and mixed by Andrea Klunder and Edwin Ruiz at the Creative Imposter Studios. This episode was brought to you by my company, The Distribution Team. We are a consulting services firm dedicated to helping wholesale distribution clients remove barriers to profitability, generate wealth, and achieve personal goals. To learn more about how we can help your company succeed, check us out at www.thedistributionteam.com.